Welcome readers, listeners, and viewers from across America and around the world. It's January 16, 2010, a new decade. It's 5 p.m. and this is a live show. I'm your host, Garcia from FallenAngels.tv, and today I am honored to have as guest with me my good friend, Dr. Joye Pugh, author, poet, musician, well known for her latest book, Eden, The Knowledge of Good and Evil, 666, which made it to #1 in 3 separate categories at Amazon.com. Eden is the follow-up of her earlier work, The Antichrist, the cloned image of Jesus Christ, which we have linked from our website. It's available from tape publication in audio and book form. And she has just recently released a CD of original music, which you can find with all of her other work at her website, drjoye.com. That's Dr.Joye.com. Last year, we were blessed to do several radio interviews with Dr. Joye, as well as a 2-hour video shoot where we met with her at the Athens Botanical Garden here in Georgia to discuss what we will go further into today, the garden symbology of Genesis chapter 3. But before going into the events of Genesis, I have a few recently released news items I'd like to bring forth and have Dr. Joye make comment on. But before getting into that, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Joye Pugh.
Hi, Zen. I'm so excited about being on your show tonight. We've just got some wonderful things to talk about, and I am so thrilled to get the opportunity to be able to do this tonight with you.
Well, it always seems like that whenever we get together, Dr. Joye, that we seem to cover some very interesting territory, and it definitely brings out a lot of dialogue, and it seems to help other truth seekers out there that may be stumped on this particular thing or that particular thing, especially with the video that we did at the Athens Botanical Garden. There's just been so much commentary and just positive feedback from people, the world community out there, and I'm overjoyed about that. I'm really honored to do the work that we've done together, and I'm definitely honored to be one of your friends too, Dr. Joye.
Well, I'm looking forward for us getting together again sometime in the spring to be able actually to continue the series that I feel like we have started in trying to help people understand Genesis. Genesis is a very important book in the Bible, and I think so long we have overlooked what really God's Word has given us, and I look forward to us getting back together and doing some more videos in regard to this so that the simple truths can be known, because I think that's the problem, that most people have listened to the stories and Bible stories over the years, and they have just not really gotten the true foundation of what God gave us. And so I believe that it's actually very simple truths, but it's just being able to look for them. And I'm honored, too, to be able to be your guest when we try to present this to the world at large. And like I say, it just seems like when you do videos that people are able to sit and watch you talk about it, and they get the understanding by looking at you that your heart and your desire is for the words that are that you're actually saying, that they're coming out of your mouth in a very truth. You're not trying to do anything in a deceptive manner. So I look forward to us getting back together and talking about those things. And I hope tonight we'll be able to do some of the same. And for those that are listening, if they have any questions ever, I know they can contact you at your website, but they can also contact me through my website. There's an email address there. If they just go there and click on the email address, I'll be glad to answer any questions that we don't get to tonight. I'm always available, to answer your emails.
And I can attest to that fact because I reached out in that same way to Dr. Joye previous to our first meeting, when I was able to do a 1-hour video, which also stirred up a lot of controversy. And I know for excuse me, I'm a little bit under the weather, but I know for people that don't understand the Bible when they read it, that if they would listen to the shows that we've done, and especially that 2-hour video that we shot and talked about the garden symbology, that this could be a real skeleton key to help people to unlock the meaning, the truth of Genesis, and once you have that skeleton key, it seems to unlock all the other aspects of the Bible, all the way from the Old Testament through the New Testament. And so I look forward to covering a lot of that. But I wanted to ask you, Dr. Joye, how is Mel? Your husband, is he doing okay?
Well, he has had a major problem, and we're dealing with an increase in polyneuropathy. So we will be traveling to some more doctors for some more tests. So we would just appreciate, everyone's prayers to be able to find out what really is the problem in the next couple of weeks.
Well, I'll definitely be praying for you continuously as well. And before we go into some of the news articles that I want to bring forth before we go into the garden symbology, can you tell us about your recent projects? Because I know that you mentioned on the Cursed Net radio show that you did with Byron, not but maybe a week ago or 2 weeks ago, that you had released a CD, and we're actually going to play a couple of those pieces here during the course of the show. And I know that you were working with the History Channel on the Nostradamus effect. So can you talk about those two things, Dr. Joye?
Well, I'll start with the Nostradamus effect. I went to Washington twice last year to do the filming for the Nostradamus effect. And, of course, I was a part of, there was 12 episodes in the series, and I was a part of 3 of those episodes, with the one which was about the 7 seals, I guess was the one that I actually appeared the most in. And I, of course, was contacted because of the research that I had done in regard to end-time prophecy in 2012, Antichrist, those kinds of things. And so being a part of the History Channel, that was a great opportunity that I just am so humbled to have been asked to be a part of, because I feel like lots of times many people who will watch the History Channel may not go to church and they may not be involved in religion, but they may turn on that TV program and be willing to listen, and that something in that program may make them want to know more. And it was an opportunity, really, I feel, of a lifetime to have been asked to be a part of that. It is still airing as reruns, and of course, if you go to the History Channel and you want to purchase that series, they sell the series. If you didn't, if you want to watch the whole series of the 12 series set, but like I say, it really was very broad, and they wanted to encompass a lot of what they felt was happening in the world that really related to a lot of things, that being Da Vinci, Nostradamus, Hitler, John of Patmos. Those kinds of things are included in that series. And like I say, I feel like anyone had the opportunity to watch that on the History Channel, that they would have learned a lot about how the significance of, it seems, several different genres and different religions have all really in their, what they call their future of their religions, believe that there will be an Antichrist. And I think a lot of people had maybe not realized how significant it is that a lot of the religions mention an Antichrist. So if anything, it was to help, I think, people realize that not just Revelation and not just Christianity mentions that there's going to be like an end times, and that there's going to be an Antichrist. So, of course, you can go to my website and it'll tell you the 3 that I was involved in. And then, of course, if you're watching the History Channel and you have time to watch one of the series, I would appreciate you watching. And then the other thing that I had always really wanted to do then was to really use my music to really expound upon what I believe is end-time prophecy. And I feel like that over the years of my life that the Lord allowed me to use talent and to be able to learn musical instruments and be a part of different kinds of programs and events to build my capability, I guess I would say, to be able to go into a studio and lay down tracks and do original music and do original lyrics. I began playing drums when I was like 6 years of age. Just truly loved to play the drums. And from there, it just seemed like God offered me opportunities to learn a lot of different instruments. At the time, I never realized that I would be able to use those talents like I have. But, you know, I looked at all those years ago as a little girl sitting there playing a pair of paper drums that my parents had given me for Christmas from Sears, from Roebuck. I get tickled when I think about how I was able to go in the studio, and when I laid down the tracks for this new CD, I was able to play all the instruments. So when you listen to this CD, there is not anybody except Joye playing all the instruments and singing. So it's a total original work. And I'm really excited about it because the 12 songs are a story. And it's a story that when I was young, when I was like 13, the Jesus Christ Superstar thing really came out at that time. And before that, I had never heard any Christian music with an upbeat of what I would call a rock and roll sound, which was a rock and roll sound of the 60s and 70s, because rock and roll now is totally different, music-wise. But the 60s and 70s sound, when Andrew Lloyd Webber and Rice put that together for Jesus Christ Superstar, and they used the more modern music, and the lyrics were about the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, it really gave me a bump up in wanting to listen to and learn from what the lyrics were telling me about. So that made me go to the Bible and vice versa. And so when I decided to think about writing my own music, that was the thing, is that I wanted to write songs that when I performed them, that they were a story to very upbeat 60s, 70s kinds of sounds. And, I began just playing for fun at different events and things where I would take, like, let's say a popular song, and I would just rewrite the lyrics, and everybody used to laugh because I would say I saved the song. I took out the bad stuff that was whatever and put the good stuff in. And I didn't realize that the Lord had let me play that around in my mind and change up, that he was teaching me how to write my own lyrics to my music. And the 12 songs that are there, like I say, they all have a story, and they all fall. In other words, when you buy the CD, you'll start, on song 1, and by the time you get to song 12, you're going to have a story built in your mind about end times and what's happening, and how it directly relates to you as a person who has just listened to this CD. So it's a little bit more than just a normal CD. It is. I wanted it to be more like the way I felt when I listened to Jesus Christ Superstar, in the music and the sound and in the meaning. That something in there would make you, the words would make you stop and think, or make you want to know more about this, or make you ponder what this is meaning for me as a person, as a human being. So there's a lot of little songs in there. They're all a little bit different beats, because I wanted to use a lot of the talent that I have with the different instruments. And I'm so excited about the release of this. Now, it is available right now from the producers that contracted with me for the music, but it takes about 90 days for music to get distributed, like to iTunes and Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all those. So it will be eventually available on all those sites after probably around April the 13th. But for right now, you can go to my website, and you can click on and go directly to the label, which is TMG, and you can buy the album, now, because it can be sent out from them, not because it's not having to go through distribution from you to them or whatever. So I hope that people will support this project, because I do feel like that that they will find a song that really relates to them, and I'm tickled about it. This is, like I say, I never dreamed that the Lord was preparing me for something like this, but I'm honored, I'm humbled by the opportunity to have been offered this chance, and I really hope that I know that some people can't or don't have the time to sit down and read a 482-page book like Eden, and that was one of the reasons I put Eden on audio so people could listen to it in the car or, an e-book or whatever. But I feel like in songs, sometimes something very quick, something 4 or 5 minutes, still has an effect. And like I say, I remember the effect of the songs that were a part of the Jesus Christ Superstar rock opera that had a direct effect on me. And I'm hoping that my work will tend to do the same thing for the people who listen to it. So I'm really excited about it. So I do hope, and I do appreciate, you being willing to play a couple of the little tracks today. And then, like I said, they can go and you can click on some of the other tracks and hear some of the other music. But there's 12 total songs on the CD.
Well, I'm honored that you would even allow us to play certain selections on during the course of this show. So, and I've always wanted to have musical talent myself, but I've never had the time or the space to focus in that direction. But for those that can work in that medium, I think it's a great way to reach people and to.
Well, I think it's a good way in today's market, Zen, is that everything is so fast and people are so engrossed in what's going on. Like I say, that the majority of people don't have the time to sit down and maybe listen. And so you want to be able to do songs that are very, very thought-provoking and that will stay with you in a way that encourages you. It just seems like there's so much music out there right now that is so downtrodden. It is so sexually oriented. It's all these things that Satan wants to boggle your mind with. And that was one of the things that I wanted my music to have, these feelings and these thoughts that there is hope, and that you are very special to God. And that you need to be making sure that you have everything in order and that you know things, because it's your responsibility as an individual to know, what it is that you want for eternity. No one else can help you in eternity, just like no one helped you really at the time that you were born. You were born into the world without anything. You go out, and it's totally your concept and what you've chosen at the end when you go, whether it be through death or through the rapture. And that is the reason that I entitled my CD Before Time Stops, because I'm wanting you to think all these things through before time stops. And I hope it, like I say, I hope it will be something that people will enjoy and will support.
Well, since we're talking about the songs and the selections, I'd like to go ahead and play the first piece, Dr. Joye, and then we'll go into some of the articles and then get into the Genesis chapter 3.
Okay.
Let me turn the volume up just a little bit. This one is called In the End We Win. I like this one a lot. Excellent, excellent work, Dr. Joy. Um, the people in the chat room are eager for us to go ahead and move into the garden symbology. And so I'm going to leave the commentary that I was going to ask you about. I was just going to ask you about the web bots and their predictions that they made for 2010, but we'll save that for the end. We'll go ahead and move into the garden symbology and talk about Genesis chapter 3. And for the people out there that are not familiar with my work or with Dr. Joy's work, I just want to make this disclaimer that both of us came to this discernment in completely separate ways. I had gone the path of New Age mysticism and had spent many years entrenched in all of those teachings before the Lord brought me to the discernment that we're going to share with you. But Dr. Joy, she has been, she was born into the church that she still goes to, and it's just a small Southern Baptist church in Georgia, which both of us are from Georgia, and I give thanks because it made our gathering and coming together even simpler, and it's going to make our future work together simpler as well. But just know what we're about to go into, we both came to in different ways. Dr. Joy, would you like to start off in talking about Genesis chapter 3 and what led you to understand eating the forbidden fruit to be symbolic of an act of sexual love?
Well, like you, Zen, it was one of these things that I had not really totally understood the foundation throughout the history of what the Bible was telling us. And I, unfortunately, had based a lot of my decisions as I started doing research on a lot of the things as far as foundation that I had heard through Bible stories that had been taught to me at Sunday school. And I realized that when you're teaching children about Adam and Eve, that you can't mention certain kinds of things. But I think that because we start out in teaching children that there was an apple involved and that apple had something to do with the fact that it brought about the fall of man, it's one thing to understand that was a child's maybe rendition to help you gain some understanding, but at the same time, it can bring about a foundation in which when you build upon the thought process of an apple, that it leads you not totally to the true understanding of end times. And so when I started out doing end times work, I kept seeing things that would send me back as far as parallels to Genesis. And when I first wrote my first book, Antichrist, the Clone Image of Jesus Christ, I began to do more research. And when I really began the research for the book Eden, the reason I went back and went to Genesis was because of end time work. And that's interesting to a lot of people that that I did it in reverse, but it led me back to have to look at Genesis, reponder it, and to really establish the foundation of what really occurred with our so-called ancestors, that being Adam and Eve. And one of the first things that I think that really made me aware that there was a lot more to Genesis was actually the verse in chapter 2, verse 24. And that verse, along with the verse 25, really just was a really red flag that maybe my foundation I had not really truly understood exactly what the importance was of Adam and Eve being the first man and woman. Nowhere had I ever really been, or really had understood, I guess, through the Bible story, was that they were actually a married couple. And then that just really set a foundation of understanding a lot of things that are going to happen in end times and why we're seeing sexual revolution and whatever as we get closer and closer to the end of days. But in in the 24th verse, it says that, therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And then it says, and they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. And really, in 23, it really says that this woman had been born of the bone and the flesh out of Adam, and that she was taken out of Adam, and that woman was actually created. So it really is something to really grasp, the fact that at the moment that really Eve, or the woman, was created, that God had married them. And that from that day forward, they were in a married state when Genesis 2:25 ends. And as it ends, it says they were not ashamed, even though they were both naked. So there was no understanding that there was anything wrong or anything regarding a sexual act. It was a very simple creation and a what I would call a perfect marriage, because it's saying that she was in actuality a virgin. There had not been anything before her with Adam at that point in time. And so immediately after this, we jump into chapter 3. I mean, like, boom, we've got a woman, they're married, and all of a sudden we've got now a serpent showing up. And I think this is really, really important, because it says that the serpent, he was more subtle than any beast of the field. And I think that, unfortunately, in growing up, the pictures of the serpent being a snake and being in a, on its belly, and not really anything that you would think about being a being that might have the capability of a sexual act, you have to really look and back at the words. It does not say that serpent was a snake.
Right.
And I think that's the thing. This is where I started going, okay, we've got an issue here. What really is a serpent? And interesting enough, the new movie Avatar makes me really believe that somebody has decided to show you what the serpent looks like, and give you this beautiful looking thing that, if Eve had encountered it, that she would not have been afraid, because apparently the serpent was very smart, a lot smarter than the human, and had a lot to offer, and was quite appealing, because it goes on to say that, that this serpent was not ugly. It couldn't have been ugly, and it could not have been, like we would think about, if you come upon a snake, you would run, you wouldn't, or either try to kill it. You wouldn't be sitting there going, I'm going to talk to you and believe anything you say. You would be afraid of it. And the fact that this serpent was able to talk to her, just like you and I are talking, and to give her and offer her something of great apparent value, that is to be like God. So up until this time, the only person, according to Genesis, that she had actually had any dealings with was really Adam and God. So if you think about it, she was seeing that this serpent could offer her something more than what her husband could offer her, and also what she believed was that he could offer her something that would make her equal to God. And I think that in looking at that, that is where you've got to stop and think something of very huge significance was taking place by her even dealing with something that was called a serpent. So I think we have to look past the snake image to, and I guess this Avatar, since it's just come out, and I look at those little beings that they created, and how fashionable, and how kids will probably just go nuts over wanting to have one of those as a toy, that you can see where people would say, oh, I think she would be repulsed by that. Well, she would not have been repulsed if it was something that was created in a way to be appealing. and that's definitely what she saw, was that he was pleasant. And she wasn't
Pleasant
afraid
to
take anything from him.
Right.
Not afraid at all. So, if you go on down, God apparently had told Adam, you better not be eating of those trees out there, other than just, the trees I told you, don't mess with that tree of good and evil. But interesting enough, it doesn't ever say that actually Eve had been told directly by God not to eat. But the fact that the woman came out of the man makes them one. And that's why marriage, this is really important, that marriage makes you one flesh.
Right.
So this also explains why it says in the Bible that if the woman stays with her husband, and even though he is not saved, that she could end up saving him by staying true to the Word. And many people over the course of history have remained married to individuals who were not Christians, and there's a possibility that with them staying with them and showing them the way, that they actually became saved because of the one flesh thing. So that
right.
one flesh staying true has a lot to say about what it was trying to tell us right there before the serpent showed up. It's that when you are a married couple, you are as one flesh. And if you defile the body, you are defiling the temple of God. So, and I look at this, and when you get into chapter 3, verse 6, you find that Eve takes the fruit and she eats and gives it to her husband who is with her. And a lot of people get really upset with me, and I get a lot of emails about that I'm promoting a serpent seed theology that condemns Eve. And I think that probably some people out there who had the wrong understanding of this tried to blame Eve as the fall of mankind and whatever, and they've made Eve look like the real terrible ordeal in all this. But we must remember, looking back, that Eve had never been told this information directly by God according to the Scriptures. She had to have only been told that by what I believe would have been Adam's understanding of that. Even still, when they became one flesh and that serpent showed up and she was standing there with her husband, and that's the critical thing right here. She did not take of this fruit in secret with this serpent. She did it in full-fledged, open, communication with her husband right there beside her. And I think this is crucial. It's crucial to understand this, that Adam watched when she took the fruit, and then he participated after her immediately, because it says that she ate, and then she gave to also her husband with her, and he ate. So I think this is really critical that you understand how important it is that we are not promoting a serpent seed theology that these other people out there have tried to promote to down Eve and whatever, I get really upset when I get emails, because I'm thinking you have not really listened to what I'm saying, and you're not following what we're trying to do. Jen and I are trying to send you in a direction to understand the foundation of what really occurred here. We're not condemning Eve, Adam, whatever. Adam and Eve became fallen as a group, as a one flesh, and this is why they were condemned. And if you look at this, it says both of their eyes were open, and they knew they were naked, and they sewed the fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. Well, now, if you had not had a sexual act, why would you have been concerned that you were naked? Because in chapter 2:25, they were both naked and they were not ashamed.
Right.
What made them now aware that the nakedness was for something a little bit more than what they had known about in chapter 2:25? And it was so bad that they went and sewed fig leaves together to cover themselves.
And
I think
specifically
that's
their genitals.
important.
They covered specifically their genitals.
That's right. And if that was the case, and this is the thing that I can't stress enough, if you get your hands caught in the cookie jar as a child when your mother comes in, does she say, you know, I'm going to punish you by making you have children? Or does she say, no, next time you put your hand in that cookie jar and you eat those cookies before dinner time, I'm not going to let you have any more candy for the next 2 weeks? And in my opinion, God has always been, especially in Mosaic law, with an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Why would God be so upset about them eating a piece of fruit that would turn around and condemn them in a sexual aspect unless something sexual had occurred?
Exactly. That was my contention precisely.
And that's the thing that really I think is so important for people to understand then.
Exactly, because why else would he tell Eve that now she's going to bring forth children in sorrow and pain? And also, why would he tell Adam that he's now going to have to bring forth sustenance to feed the children that he's now going to have? And then why would he curse the serpent and tell him that he's going to put enmity between her and the woman and his seed and her seed?
That's right. It makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, God is the creator God. He would never have, he does not punish you for one thing for something totally different. It would have been, I told you not to eat of this fruit. You ate of the fruit, then let's just say everybody was going to die. He could have said, you ate of the fruit, you're going to die. I told you you're going to die, you're going to fall over dead. Boom, that's it. Why did it have anything to do with the conception?
Right.
If eating of the fruit made you die, then why didn't it just go, you ate the fruit, in 5 minutes you're fixing to fall over dead. Bam.
Fall over dead.
That's not what happened. All of a sudden, we've got a curse that says, I'm going to put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. And notice the word thy seed. It's talking about the serpent's seed. Well, the serpent has not got like an apple hanging on him, okay? He is, when we're talking about seed, we're talking about being able to have a sexual relationship, and he has the ability to seed something. And if he has the ability to seed something, then we got a whole different concept that I think that the majority of people have missed out on to establish this foundation that's very crucial to the understanding of this whole process. Because at that point, if you do not understand that there is a real problem now that has happened, and that God is so mad about it that he would say, I'm going to make you, serpent, I'm going to put this enmity, which is, the word is positive hatred, between you, serpent, and the woman, and between your seed, Satan, or the serpent, and her seed, Eve, because it will bruise your head, Satan, and thou shalt bruise his heel. And, of course, we know that his heel will be Jesus, who will come through flesh lineage through Adam. And that's crucial to understand, is that this was now about something a lot bigger and a bigger problem than just Adam and Eve in the garden. Now we're talking about humanity as a whole.
Right.
And then I think that the next thing is also very, 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 very important. In verse 16, God says to Eve, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. Right there, thy conception. If she had just eaten a piece of fruit, he'd have said, I'm going to make you really, really sick. You're going to throw up 1,000 times because you just ate something really bad for you. You cannot have another apple ever. But he doesn't say that. He says, I'm going to multiply your sorrow and thy conception. So a sex act had been committed, because if it had not, why would God bring up thy conception like it just happened? He didn't say, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow. And in the future, when you decide to have children, he doesn't say that. He says, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. So a sex act had been committed with Satan, and this is because before, God had had no problem with Adam and Eve having sex as he had married them. And back there in verse 25 in chapter 2, there apparently wasn't a problem. They were naked, they were not ashamed, whatever. But when this situation with the serpent occurred, now God's having a major problem with Adam and Eve. And he is absolutely telling them that having sex, as they apparently had just had sex, and a conception's involved, that he's going to condemn Eve in childbearing. So that is as if she had done something totally sexually wrong.
Right.
And he said, and if that was not the case, then why bring up conception if it was just a piece of fruit from a tree of good and evil? Like we've been laid the foundation to think about somebody eating an apple.
Another thing that people don't realize is that when he said that if you eat of that fruit that you will die, excuse me, he was talking about them entering into the flesh. And these were really, Genesis 3 is prophetic of the life that they will lead while in the flesh after being banished from paradise. And so they, in essence, did, once they entered into the flesh, do exactly as the Lord had said and died, because they did die in the flesh.
That's right. Not any of even the lineage of Adam through Seth all the way to Noah, they never lived 1,000 days. Methuselah came the closest of all the lineage to live almost 1,000 days, and we know the Bible says that in heaven 1 day is like 1,000 years on earth. So, they never really lived out the day. So their death really was, based on heaven's terms, they didn't even live the day out.
Right. Dr. Joye, I have one other question to ask you as far as, because this is something that many people ask as well. When they talk about the fruit being eaten by both Adam and Eve, I always tell the people that nowhere in this particular chapter does it say that the serpent was either male or female, and that we know that that they can shapeshift and transform, and that they are as an angel of light, and that the angels can also come in male and female form. And so many people will say that that was a homosexual act, but it doesn't say that the serpent was either male or female. What's your take on that?
Well, I think that the fact that Eve became the bearer of the conception, that if there had been another child involved, if you look on down in that verse 16, it really says that in sorrow, he's talking to Eve, thou shalt bring forth children. And the thing that I find interesting, why didn't he say, you're going to bring forth a child, but he says now you're going to bring forth children. And
right.
Your desire shall be subjected to really your husband, and he's going to rule over you. So it appears to me that it had to, as far as bringing in a being into a fleshly world, that it had to be that she had to give birth to something that was really more of a hybrid than it would have been the true DNA, let's say, of she and Adam. So I think that in looking at that, I would just tend to say that if it had been the other way, that I think that God would have had more of a different curse maybe on Adam than he did. We noticed in verse 17 that he curses Adam really to toil the ground for the food, and really that's really for not stopping Eve from really doing something wrong because she was his wife. And if you know anything about the marriage vows, it says, all these things that you're going to do for the wife and be responsible. And even in the Bible, it tells you that, Jesus was like the church and that he was willing to die for it, and that, he would be doing the church this way, meaning that the church would be Jesus' bride at the end of time, that he was willing to do all these things, but he expected his bride to be a virgin and to be clean and pure. And I think that's the thing that really stands out here in all this curse that was brought upon Adam and Eve, is that when God created Adam and Eve, they had truly perfect DNA. So if you think about it, if they had had children, the DNA would have been a cleansed and perfect DNA. Meaning that those children could have really had sexual relations with their sisters, and there would have been no genetic malfunction. Like today, if we had a man and a brother and sister or whatever have a child, the chances of mental retardation and those kinds of things, where there's major problems in having incest go on, that you have a problem. But with Adam and Eve, with pure DNA, they would have absolutely had no problem. So that tells you that when Cain came about, that something was very unusually different about his DNA structure. If Adam and Eve were good and they didn't have any, what I call psychological problems or whatever, and their DNA was pure, then their children should have had purity all the way, through the lineages. But for some reason, we can look later and see Cain having this thing in his mind to kill Abel. If you think about people who murder, or people who go off the deep end and do crazy, strange things, many times those people have a malfunction in brain chemicals or some genetic underlying problem. And so you have to think, well, now, if there was a being that was made through the serpent, that its mixture in with Eve's seed and the serpent or whatever would have been a total different being, a hybrid type being, from what we see that Adam and Eve themselves would have had as children. And if you look further on in Genesis, you know that when it talks about Adam's lineage, it never mentions Cain. I mean, that to me is like a red flag, that it never mentions Cain. And of course, Cain's lineage is absolutely different in the way that it's mentioned in Genesis. None of the people other than their names and what they were very astute in as far as the sciences, that is mentioned. But it never tells you about the length of days or anything of that nature. And to me, when you've got one lineage being really talked about and really explained, and another one's kind of mentioned as out there or whatever, that has to be noted that there is something the Bible is trying to tell us, and that would tell me that there's a difference in the genetic makeup of the two, Cain's lineage and Seth's lineage.
Absolutely. And it also, most people don't realize that what we're talking about from the Old Testament in Genesis in chapter 3, and then Genesis chapter 4 and 5 is the separation of the two lineages, and it has Cain as the whole seed line. That is the same thing that the New Testament talks about when it talks about the parable of the wheat and the tares. And we'll cover some of that as well, but let's continue on, because I know another point of contention is Genesis chapter 4:1. But I want you to continue on, Dr. Joye, and then we'll go into that next.
Well, I'll move into that because if you look at before all the verses that we have really been talking about, at this point in time in Genesis, even Eve doesn't have the name yet. She's just considered Adam's wife at this point in time and the woman. And we get into to verse 20 in chapter 3, and we find that Adam now calls his wife Eve. And it says because she was, W-A-S, past tense, was the mother of all the living, every father's family. So that's telling you she had to be pregnant, not that she was going to be the mother, but that she was. And the fact that at this point in time, we have to realize that if Eve was in fact the wife, that if God had warned Adam not to eat or touch that tree, yet he allowed his own flesh, that would be Eve, which was of his rib, and they were created as one, so he had let his helpmeet sin, and he had not stopped the act. So that this is that's really important to remember. So at this point in time, we're talking about in chapter 3, we're already seeing that God has mentioned a conception that has taken place. He has also mentioned that I'm going to curse your seeds between you, Satan and Eve. He has also brought curse upon Adam for not standing up for his wife and protecting his own flesh, because he and Eve, of course, or he and the woman at that point in time, were one flesh. And we also have Adam giving a name to his wife called Eve in the past tense, because she was the mother of all living, every father's family. And then, of course, God puts the skins on them and helps them stay covered up, and he puts them out of Eden. So then, like you say, we get into chapter 4, and I hear this all the time. Well, the Bible specifically says that Adam knew his wife, and that she conceived and she had their son. But I want us to read this very, very cautiously, because now we're coming off of what we had just heard in chapter 3, that she's already pregnant to this point. So Adam knew his wife Eve, and I will tell you, yes, he knew his wife was Eve. He knew his wife was Eve back in chapter 2, verse 25. Or when she was even taken out of his rib, he knew they were now one flesh. They would cling to each other in a marriage vow. They were married. He knew that.
Right.
And then it says that the verse actually breaks with like a little semicolon. And then it says, then she conceived. But we have to go back into chapter 3. And when did that conception, by conception, happen? According to verse 16, it had happened prior to that, because God was actually bringing a curse upon Eve for what she had done.
Right.
So that means that she and the serpent were the first to eat together. And then Adam then followed after she had eaten with Satan. And it takes right there, it takes a verse break. You get another comma, and then it says, and bare Cain. And if you look at the name of concordance reference to what Cain actually, the word Cain means, it means acquired. Well, to me, acquiring something is a whole lot different than giving birth to something of an Adam and Eve lineage, because she says she acquired it. I have gotten a man from the Lord. Well, Adam is not the Lord. Why didn't she say, Adam and I have had a child now, and I've gotten pregnant, and here's our child? But then it says in verse 2, Eve again bare, and it makes no mention of conceiving again. And it says his brother Abel. And if you look at the concordance of what Abel, the word Abel means, it translates as breath. And breath means, according to the Bible, a living soul that was like what God blew into Adam, a neshama. That means that Abel was Adam's son because he was like him in the breath that he had.
Right.
So it can only be that Eve delivered two children. she delivered what I believe are twins by different fathers.
Right.
And this is humanly possible because it's called heteropaternal superfecundation. Is the medical term for a woman who has a sexual act and one egg is fertilized by the first man, and then within even up to a day or longer, if she drops another egg and has sexual relationships, then the second child will be from the other person she has had a sexual relationship with. When she delivers, and on the day they deliver, she gives birth, she's going to give birth to two, what we could call a type of twin, but they are from a different father. And I think that when I realized that, I was like, well, is that medically possible? I want to just, well, this is medically possible. So I just did a lot of research, on this and found out that, yes, that is possible for fraternal twins to have different fathers. And that's exactly what has happened, I believe, in there with the conception. It's actually a very rare form of twins, but it occurs when the egg is released, even though another egg has been fertilized. If the second egg is fertilized by another man's sperm, these fetuses would be no closer genetically than half siblings. So
we have to remember, too, that the Lord said that I will put enmity between thy seed and her seed. So
that's
that right there is telling you that there's two separate seed lines.
That's right. It's two. And when we talk about what I mentioned earlier, what does the word enmity mean? It says it means positive hatred. And what did Cain have against Abel?
Hatred.
He had positive hatred. And if that's not a genetic, in other words, there it is, it's telling you that serpent seed has positive hatred for Abel. If it had not had positive hatred, Abel had not done anything wrong. You read the context, the rest of the verses there. It came time to give the first fruits to God. Abel got all his stuff together, and he took it and he gave his stuff to God. He didn't go to Cain and say, well, I expect you to do this and me to do this or whatever. He went and presented his first fruits. Cain kind of decided to go when he wanted to go do whatever. So in other words, Cain did not even have the love of God in his heart because he didn't do it. He didn't give the first fruits as it was expected. So right there, he's already got a genetic difference about him because you know that Adam and Eve, they saw God. They walked with God. I'm sure when it came time for them to do whatever God asked, they did it the way God asked because they were victims of what the curse had been thrown upon them. They knew what paradise, in fact, they're the only two that really knew what paradise was like in the human clan. They were the only two that's ever been what I would call in paradise before. So they knew what they had given up by not doing or listening to the commandments of God. But it seems to me that Abel was following his father's blessings and staying, in with what God was expecting of first fruits or whatever. But Cain didn't, even from the beginning, he didn't want to go give God what he thought God deserved. He kind of gave what he wanted to do. And so that tells you that if he had been the son, the true son of Adam and Eve, they'd have said, okay, Cain, if you don't give this, any good mother and father, even if you turn out to be bad, they're going to say, kid, this is the way it is. They're going to try to tell you and steer you in the right way. So apparently he knew he was supposed to go give those first fruits, but he chose not to. So that tells me that he had a mindset that was totally different than what Abel's was. And Abel, the fact that he was named as a breath of Adam, was apparently doing what he knew he was supposed to do with those first fruits. Then, because Abel is doing what is right, what does Cain do but slew his brother? And right there, in my opinion, there had not really been what I call killings and deaths at that point. Nothing is mentioned about killings and death at that point. So it had to have been something that was totally genetically, thought process, totally different. And
Absolutely.
if anything, it fulfills that fact of that curse that there would be actually positive hatred. And that's what had occurred when Cain killed Abel.
And then, too, in Genesis chapter 4, verse 7, the Lord says, if thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted? And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door, and unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. The Lord was warning him right then to not act like his father Satan, and to have this negative, murderous nature. And of course he acted out because he is, as his father, the first murderer, liar, and deceiver, and he killed his brother. Also, I wanted to bring this out too, Dr. Joy, because a lot of people that always, and I think you explained Genesis chapter 4:1 just so well. But for those that don't know, there are other scriptures called the Targums, which were different translations of the different language translations of the scriptures that were available during that period of time when the scriptures had been translated in different, to make them available to other cultures and other people. But there's two a Palestinian Targum and an Aramaic Targum, and they give different translations for this Genesis chapter 4:1, and I'm going to read those different translations because they give greater insight into the King James version of Genesis chapter 4:1. From the Aramaic Targum, the Targum of Jonathan, it says, Genesis 4:1, and Adam knew his wife Eve, who was pregnant by Samuel, Satan, and she conceived and bare Cain. And he was like the heavenly beings and not like earthly beings. And she said, I have gotten a man from the angel of the Lord. From the Palestinian Targum of Genesis 4:1, and Adam knew his wife Eve, who had desired the angel, and she conceived and bare Cain. And she said, I have acquired a man, the angel of the Lord. But I want to read one other particular scripture, and this is from the Protevangelion of James, and it's a story of Joseph coming upon Mary and finding her pregnant. And just listen to the story because it gives introspection into this as well. And she was in her 6th month, and behold, Joseph came back from his building, and entering into his house, he discovered that she was big with child. And he smote his face and threw himself on the ground upon the sackcloth and wept bitterly, saying, with what face shall I look upon the Lord my God? And what prayer shall I make about this maiden? Because I received her a virgin out of the temple of the Lord, and I have not watched over her. Who is it that has hunted me down? Who has done this evil thing in my house and defiled the virgin? Has not the history of Adam been repeated in me? For just as Adam was in the hour of his singing praise, and the serpent came and found Eve alone and completely deceived her, so it has happened to me also. And lo, and Joseph stood up from the sackcloth and called Mary and said to her, O you who has been cared for by God, why have you done this and forgotten the Lord your God? Why have you brought low your soul, you that was brought up in the Holy of Holies, and that received food from the hand of an angel? And she wept bitterly, saying, I am innocent, and have known no man. And Joseph said to her, whence then is that which is in your womb? Now, just to read that one particular sentence again, has not the history of Adam been repeated in me? For just as Adam was in the hour of his singing praise, and the serpent came and found Eve alone and completely deceived her, so it has happened to me also. And so Joseph is telling the story of how Adam had come to find his wife also pregnant with Cain, who was not his son, but the son of Lucifer. Dr. Joy?
Yes, I mean, I think that's how you have to really cross-reference the Bible. That's why I think it's most important by what you just shared, then, is that we are seeing as to the reason that Jesus had to come under the certain circumstances that he had to be born under, because it had to counteract what really had happened between Eve and the serpent. And I think it's most important, if you really notice what was said in that, is the fact that Mary and Joseph were not married. So if you look at it, Satan had come to Eve after she had been married to Adam, and that was adultery. It was whoredom. Those are the things that when you look at the commandments and all through the history of the Bible, it talks about mixing, adultery. You know, that one of the worst things in the world is whoredom. And you look at the book of Revelation, it talks about the whore of Babylon. All those kinds of things means that it ties all the way back to the very beginning, because God wants his church to be in a perfect state of purity, a virgin, right, not mingled or mixed with. And if you look at what you just said, Cain was in a fallen state. If he was born under those circumstances, he was in a fallen state based on what God has already condemned throughout the Bible. But you also look that when God or the Holy Spirit came upon Mary, she was not married to Joseph. So there was not an adultery type thing involved. Instead, she was in a perfect state. She was in the perfect virgin state, just like Jesus is coming back for his church, and he will want his church to be like. And that is in that pure virgin state. So if you look at it, there was a child born by the use of spiritual beings, one deceived, and that was, of course, Satan was deceptive in getting his child born. But then Mary was told by God and granted knowledge before as to what is about to happen, why you have been chosen. And so Jesus, by being born under that circumstances, he broke the line of the sinful past. In other words, the curse of the head versus the heel. Jesus became the second Adam. He was flesh without sin, versus Adam and what was born through Adam and Eve and Cain and all that. Then, of course, sin became a part of that. But I think the real thing here is to really see that Jesus is a bridegroom. In the whole part of it, of really the New Testament, we're told, even at the end of time, he is the bridegroom. He is waiting for his bride, the church, and that he does not want us polluted by anything. His expectations are that you cannot be mixed with whoredom, that you can't be mixed with paganism, that you cannot do anything but be pure, just like the Virgin Mary was. So it's a parallel all the way from Eden to why Jesus was born of Mary to what's going to happen in end times and the expectation of those that he will rapture and bring and put back into paradise. Because he's not going to put anything back into paradise that's going to be any mixture of what Cain has to offer. If you look at the end of Revelation, it does not mention that there is a tree of good and evil. The only thing that's mentioned in the very last chapter of Revelation is the tree of life. So that means that other tree is gone forever. It never exists again in paradise.
Absolutely. Now, with that, I want to tie this in because most people don't have any idea that the Lord in the New Testament makes many, many myriad references exactly to what Dr. Joye and I are talking about. And so that's why if you receive this knowledge and are open to it, and you reread your Bible, it will serve as a skeleton key to unlock so many other passages. But just real quick from Matthew chapter 13, and just know, for the listening audience out there, the next video that Dr. Joye and I will be working on will tie in all of the New Testament references, which are also congruent to this particular teaching. And so we'll cover a lot of that because we weren't able to in that second video. Excuse me. Matthew chapter 13. Declare unto us the parable of the tares of the field. He answered and said unto them, He that soweth the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom, but the tares are the children of the wicked one. The enemy that sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the world, and the reapers are the angels. As therefore the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so shall it be in the end of this world. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend and do iniquity, and shall cast them into a furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. There's also mentioned in several passages how the Canaanites and the line of Esau have no part in salvation. And for those that study the extra biblical books, such as myself, if you read the first book of Adam and Eve, or actually it's the second book of Adam and Eve, when it talks about the generations of Adam and Eve throughout the first 10 generations leading to Noah, it makes many, many references about not intermixing with the Canaanites. And every patriarch from Adam all the way up to Noah's father, they are implored over and over to warn the children to not intermarry or intermix with the children of Cain. And so we'll be doing that as soon as we can, hopefully this spring. Dr. Joye, would you like to comment on that?
Well, I think that what you're saying is so true, that people do not understand that this is a major theme that runs throughout Scripture. I mean, from the Old Testament right on into the New Testament and through the New Testament, to really bring about the understanding as to why the relationship between men and women and sexual types of things are so important to know about. And if you really look at, let me just mention a couple little things just about that. If you look at like 1 Corinthians 7, chapter 7, verse 5, if you read the verses right before that, you find that it's trying to tell you about not being involved in anything that is sexually deviant or whatever, and that your husband and wife are supposed to be really, like you say, completely pure and whatever. But if you will note in that actual chapter 5 or chapter 7, verse 5, that it says that Satan really has the power to attack married couples. And it's warning you that a man and a wife should be aware that Satan not tempt you, and it says for your incontinency, which is a lack of self-restraint, or the inability to voluntarily retain would be a word of a bodily discharge. And so if you really stop and think about this, if the New Testament is telling you that Satan has a way to manipulate or make you do things and make you participate in these wrong things, that he is actually condemning you forever. And I think that one of the biggest indicators that I see in the New Testament is really like if you start, like I say, in 1 Corinthians, maybe chapter 6 and verse 9, you'll find that Paul continually says, do not be deceived. What really is this sin? And the sin that Paul specifically names in 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 10, the very first thing he mentions is fornicators. That is a Greek word for porno. In other words, sexual immortality, or an immoral act between unmarried partners, or with really the wrong thought processes involved. And then he goes on, and what's the second thing he says? He's going to bring in adulterers. He's going to bring in the fact that homosexuality. He brings in about the sodomites. I mean, he brings in all these things. If sexual immortality was not so bad, then, in my opinion, if something where we're talking about in the Garden of Eden, where a curse happens on Eve about conception, and you're supposed to be always with your husband, you never, that he's going to rule over you, this, that, and the other, we have read before. Throughout the text now we're hearing, don't do this, don't do that, don't have these sexual things. So what is Satan using right now more than anything in the world to bring people down? When I have case studies of people who contact me saying, I can't get rid of these demons in my life. I'm constantly being harassed. These aliens are showing up. They're taking me. They're doing these crazy things to me. I can't stop it. I mean, I hear case after case after case, Zen, that I deal with on a daily basis of people who are having to deal with it. My first question to them is, are you participating in anything that is sexually wrong? And most times people think, well, nobody knows if I'm doing porno on the website, or I've got a book hidden somewhere, or something. It's only just me and myself that knows that. The problem with that is that is Satan. That is Satan's tool to destroy you. If you turn on the TV, you look at any of the music videos. If you watch any of the music video channels, if you listen to the words that are being just across the radios, this rap music, and what it's telling people to do, it is Satan's words. It is Satan's pictures. It is whatever Satan can get to you when you think nobody else knows. And he is using that just like he did Eve. He's manipulating you to think, well, nobody knows, it's making me feel good, it's just me and myself, What the problem is that is what he is going to use to bring your downfall. He did the same thing in Eden. And so throughout the Bible, we constantly hear God saying, remain pure. Do not do these acts. Do not be, involved with this. Not even lust in your heart. We remember back when Jimmy Carter answered the question, do you ever lust for women? And he was like, well, if I said it in my heart, then it's act like I've already done that. The Bible says that's true. So if you want to understand what God is trying to tell us throughout this Bible, the bad act is anything that is sexually deviant from what was established in the very beginning. If it was not so bad, why is that and it is, Zen, and I think it would be great for us to continue that when we do the videos, because I don't think people understand how important that one thread is from Genesis all the way to the end time. And then for those that make it past, it says that you're not going to be given in marriage, you're not going to have a husband, there's not any sexual stuff going on, and there is no good and evil tree.
Right. Absolutely. Real quick, from Romans chapter 8, verse 5. For they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh, but they that are after the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Because the carnal mind is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be. So then, they that are in the flesh cannot please God. And Romans chapter 8 talks about, living for the Spirit and not living for the flesh. And also, we know that Satan utilizes drugs and sexual deviance in every kind of manner to cause people to sin and keep people in sin. And that the Luciferic rites and passages, the ceremonies that they do, often have sexual deviance as part of the ritual. Would you care to comment on that, Dr. Joye?
Well, I think that's the main thing. If you look at all the things that are satanic, they all involve a sexual connotation, whether it be with children, whether it be with women, whether it be sodomization, whatever. It has something to do with a sexual act. And unfortunately, for the people that I've dealt with who had, let's say, ritual abuse as a child, they have so much problem in getting past that to the point that they blame themselves, and that is exactly what Satan wants, because then you set the person up to continue doing the same thing to other people that they had done to them, and becomes a very vicious cycle. And these people who promote the Satanist agenda, that's how they have gotten into, like, the priest of the Vatican. The whole intent to bring the smoke of Satan into the Vatican back in, like, 1963, when Malachi Martin says it entered into the Vatican, was to be able to get priests who were homosexual and to abuse those children under them to the point that those little boys or girls or whatever became the same, and then it became, in other words, it breeds upon itself. And if a person is not strong enough and not strong-willed enough to know that this is something that Satan has used against them, they will turn around and produce the same act because they think that they are dirty or filthy and that they can never be rejustified back to their pure state. They forget that when Jesus died upon the cross of Calvary, that all sins were forgiven, and that if you plead the blood of Jesus, your slate is white clean. Whatever has happened to you is white clean, and you are a new person in Christ, and you are to take on the same bodily thought in the flesh that Jesus had, and restrain Satan from using your past, either bad predicament or whatever you were involved in, to keep you from getting to paradise. He's going to do that. You have to let go, and you have to go to God totally. You can't play back on all that old stuff that may have happened to you as a child. If you do, Satan is controlling you, and he will continue to control you, because the sexual act, if you think about it, there are many, many children in this world that are born every day outside of wedlock. There are many who are forced to get married. And then their whole lives then are changed and made different than what it might have been had those things not happened. So it's crucial to understand how Satan is using sex as a powerful, very powerful tool with humanity. And all, like you say, all the satanic rituals that I have ever been made aware of, where people have been involved in that, they all involve some type of sexual act. And that even goes for your secret societies with men who get on up into the Illuminati and the higher echelons of these societies. They are forced to do a homosexual act with another man. And the reason being is that that point, once that happens, they will use that against that man. If he ever tries to come out against that secret society, they're going to say, well, now you tell on us, and we're going to tell this on you. It's a powerful tool that Satan can use. You think, oh, my gosh, I wouldn't want anybody to know that I ever did that. They will stay locked into that kind of thing because of their fear of someone finding out that they were participating in those kinds of things. And the Bible specifically tells us that that God did not make the human body for fornication.
Right.
It says, but for the Lord it was made, and the Lord for the body.
Dr. Joye, we've got just about 30 minutes remaining. I'd like to give out the call-in number if anybody would like to call and ask you any questions in this last part of the episode. The call-in number is 646-929-0937. Once again, that's 646-929-0937. And we're just going to take a quick break and play this other song selection from Dr. Joye's new album. It's called The Master's Plan, and we'll be right back. Well, Dr. Joye, I so look forward to hearing the rest of the album selections, and I know the listening audience does as well. Before we take this call, I'm going to read just real quickly two other pieces of scripture, one from the Gospel of Philip and another one from the Kebra Nagat. And these are also two extra-biblical books. But what I found is that in studying the extra-biblical books, that knowledge of Cain being a child of Lucifer was rampant. I mean, I found it in many, many different places. And so this quote, first, adultery came into being, afterward murder. And he was begotten in adultery, for he was the child of the serpent. So he became a murderer just like his father, and he killed his brother. Indeed, every act of sexual intercourse which has occurred between those unlike one another is adultery. That's the Gospel of Philip. From the Kebra Nagat, the raping of Eve is what led to the birth of Cain, as Adam knows immediately that Cain is of ill temperament. And at that sorrowful moment, Cain was born, and when Adam saw that the face of Cain was ill-tempered or sullen, and his appearance evil, he was sad. And that's from the Kebra Nagat. But we'll go ahead and take this call from area code 832. You have a question for Dr. Joye?
Yes, sir. Zen, thank you for taking my call. I personally first wanted to thank you guys for your ministries. You guys have been very instrumental in waking me up, and it's been a very transforming process as far as my walk with Christ, and I'm indebted to you guys. Joy, your book, Eden, is absolutely fantastic. Very, very thankful for you guys. Also, you guys have both been in correspondence with me over email, and I want to thank you guys for being available to the people out there.
Well, thank you.
Quite welcome.
Yeah. I had a question about the UFO deception, if I would be allowed to ask. I know
Please.
in my researches, I know that that's something that the illuminated ones are going to use in these last days, to get us to accept this alien presence. I have come across the idea in my studies. I guess it's from Elijah's story in the Chariot of Fire and Ezekiel's will, and basically is the holy angels. And is there like a UFO presence for the good guys? And the thing that concerns me is researching stuff like Project Bluebeam and the fake rapture theory. As far as discerning in y'all studies, have you guys come across anything as far as the good guys?
Are you talking about the good guys as far as
the holy angels?
coming? Okay. I fully believe that as far as you having a visitation from a holy angel, it would not be in the form of a UFO, and it would not be someone coming into a bedroom at night and scaring you and paralyzing you. When you think about when the angels of the Lord visited even the Virgin Mary, they appeared as men, and they were very kind, considerate. The voice was, from what the presence of what the Bible is telling us, it was not a fearful, terrible, terrible thing. Where if you know anything about UFOs and alien abductions, those are very horrific, very scary, very intrusive acts that these supposed alien visitations bring about upon a human being. And so if God did decide to send an angel, I fully believe it would be in a form of peace. You would have no feeling of fear. You would have no feeling that you had been abused or that you were being given some great revelation about, what I call New Age doctrine. It would be based totally on whatever the Scripture said. And I do believe that God still does do that and does manifest himself to people. So I believe they exist, but the angels of the Lord are, the Spirit of the Lord does not have anything in common with what I have read and researched in regard to aliens and alien abduction.
All right. So like Ezekiel's wheel and the Chariot of Fire, do you think that those might be attributed to any kind of UFOs, though, or?
In my feeling about that, I think that probably that what was happening there, I've got a question as to what exactly happened with those wheels and how that description is. Been doing a little bit of research in regard to that to really make me a little more aware of what could have been used in a situation where those people were not aware of what was going on. Now, many people try to say that it was a UFO like we see today and whatever. The thing that I have a concern about is this. If God created this world, he does not have to have any ship to ride in. If he created
Exactly.
angels, they can manifest themselves wherever they wanted to come and go. When Jesus went up into the clouds, it doesn't say he was beamed up, Scotty, to this ship and then it took off. I mean, I have a question as to what was really going on with that, and so if I had to say something was of God, I don't think that I would be very, very skeptical of anyone who came to me and said, Joy, God showed up on a ship and he beamed me up to it. That is just, God doesn't have to do that. I mean, honestly, we're talking about the Creator who created everything, and
right.
I just don't feel like that's how he ever has presented himself truly, either in voice. I mean, you stop and think about Moses. Moses was called up into the mountain. He was turned and told to stay in the cliff or the rock, and when God passed by, I guess, because of how wonderful and how perfect and how magnificent he is, his face had a brazen suntan. And for people who have near-death experiences, the first thing that most of them have related to me was this pure white light that they encountered, this wonderful, brilliant, whatever. So I think that the manifestation of God it will be like at the end of time when it says that he's going to blow the trumpets and boy, everybody's going to know he's up there. I don't think it's going to be on a big cruise ship up in the sky. I think that those skies are going to bust open, and that bright light is going to be so bright that it will absolutely encompass everything, and you will fall to your knees because you cannot stand in its presence. And I think it's so powerful. If you think about laser, this is a thing that I try to say, even in looking at the Shroud of Turin, that something went through the cloth when Jesus was resurrected and left that image, that it had to be such a burst of radiational light. And we think about radiation, typically if you take chemo or whatever and they use radiation, it will typically burn the skin. So I'm thinking that when we hear about Moses and his face, that there was some radiational type of thing going on, if we want to be able to say something scientifically could be like God, because God is much greater than what the science we can understand. But just trying to put it on a level we can understand, if you look at what a laser is and how perfect a laser light is, that it can do all these kind of things. Within light itself, being alive as we know it and how it affects the DNA, there's no reason that God would ever have to make something to support himself in. I also think back as to when the temple, we were talking about building the temple and the altars. If we think back, with altars, he didn't want even the rocks hewn for an altar to him. In other words, Abraham, and then we're told to just pile up the rocks. Don't you put your hand to it and try to make it better than what God originally designed it to be. And at the same time, if the Ark of the Covenant was something he came in and spoke through, but yet he didn't have a ship that came over and came down or whatever. I just think that light in itself, the power of light, is God, and it's manifested in a much greater understanding than we can ever understand with our brains. But that would be more of a display, I think, of God, where the manifestation of his angels would be like the form of men, just like in the case of Lot, when the angels, came into Sodom and Gomorrah, they looked as men. And it tells us in the Bible, be careful to entertain strangers because you may be entertaining angels. So I just have a question in my mind about all of that and how it relates to anything to do with UFOs.
Awesome.
I'd like to answer.
Pause
to
angels of God.
I'd like to touch on that as well. Dr. Joye, I tend to agree with you that the Lord does not need a vehicle to ride around in. and that it says that, and also we know that there is a great deception being set up, and that the Antichrist will come first in whatever form and whatever shape. And there's many Antichrists, but that we know that the Vatican is also in part to play with this great deception, and I do believe it has part to play with the extraterrestrials or the fallen angels being established as the creators or the benefactors of humanity, and that they're benevolent. And even the Lord warns us that even the elect shall be deceived. But we know that when the Lord comes, that everybody, it will be, the sign of the cross will be seen from one end of the world to the other, and that the good angels are not going to come until they come with him, and they're coming for judgment. They're coming to judge the fallen angels who are deceiving humanity, who are trying to set themselves up as the benefactors, as the so-called creators of humanity. And we know now that many, many, many people are accepting the premise that the extraterrestrials are the creators of mankind. And that's also being established by a lot of the Sumerian teachings, which were written by the fallen angels themselves. So, I mean, can you really trust that? And so
I think that's really important, and I think that's why you're seeing such a manifestation of it. I know even if you think about the demonic beings that were left here on earth when the giants died, and their spirits walked and went around and would go inside of people. We know that Jesus would have to call them out when he was here. You know, he would cast out, and of course the exorcisms or whatever. But I think that these demonic beings like that have to manifest themselves in some kind of body. And if you notice, most of the alien abduction creatures are all like 3 foot, and they all have the same look. I'm not so sure they're not using some type of cloning procedure to make a, let's say, an outfit for this spiritual being to ride around in the physical world, and therefore it would have to have a ship to ride around in the physical world. So I think a lot of that is what Satan will use to be as signs and wonders, and like you say, at the end of time, to make it appear to those who are not intelligent or have not sat down to really study this like we have, that Satan can use something coming in the skies looking like this, and then them coming out of the spaceship and going, by the way, we created you all and we're back to save you, and you're going to do what we say do. I mean, the perfect example of that is the new little series called V. If you haven't seen that, that's like, to me, an indoctrination of exactly how these fallen angels could play themselves to be.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, thank
Did
you
you have
very
another
much.
question?
No, that's it. God bless you guys.
Okay, God bless you. We do appreciate it. Okay, Dr. Joye, well, we've got about 9 minutes remaining. I'd like to get you to give all of your website and email information before we run out of time, and then we'll continue on with what we can in the final few minutes.
Okay, again, my website is www.drjoye, that's Dr. Joye, drjoye.com, and all my books and my research, including my new CD album, is listed there, as well as the buttons that you can press on to listen to music, or know where to buy the book or the audio book, or anything to do with the first book that I did, Antichrist, the cloned image of Jesus Christ. All of that's available on the website. And I hope that you'll take time when you go to my website to look at the videos, and especially the one that Zen and I did together recently at the garden there, the Botanical Gardens in Athens. I think that study is really good. But there's also the ones that we did together some time ago, and that was at the book signing event that I did in Athens, Georgia. So there's a lot of little different things there, especially with the research that I am ongoing with in regard to end-time prophecy as far as the Antichrist and the connection to the Shroud of Turin. So there's a lot of things there, and if you would like to listen to some old archived shows that I have done, you can go to the past appearances page, and you can go to the links that are there and pull up old radio shows and whatever from the podcast or whatever that's listed at those people's links.
Okay, well, I'm going to read a quote from John chapter 8, just to kind of tie this all together through the words of the Lord. I know that ye are Abraham's seed, but ye seek to kill me, because my word hath no place in you. I speak that which I have seen with my father, and ye do that which you have seen with your father. They answered and said unto him, Abraham is our father. Jesus saith unto them, if you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. But now ye seek to kill me, a man that hath told you the truth, which I have heard of God. This did not Abraham. Jesus said unto them, if God were your father, you would love me, for I proceeded forth and came from God. Neither came I of myself, but he sent me. Why do ye not understand my speech? Even because you cannot hear my word. Ye are of your father the devil, and the lusts of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. And because I tell you the truth, you believe me not. That's John chapter 8. The final two questions from a listener. She wants to know if Satan fathered Cain, and she says, and I am now more convinced that he did, does that make Cain the first Nephilim? And then she wants to ask you also what got into Ham, allowed the Canaanite line to continue through Ham.
I definitely tend to believe that there was a genetic mutation that occurred in Cain, or he would not have had the deviant genetic actions that he showed as far as the hatred and not being willing to bow down or whatever. So that would make me think that there's a possibility. The fact that he rose up against Abel, he apparently felt he was bigger and more powerful. And so my question is, if he and Abel were about the same size, why was Abel not able to defend himself? And if we look on further in the Bible before the flood, we find that those giants were absolutely killing everything. They were bloodthirsty. They just had no love for anything. They were just actually destroying the world, and that's what really is the reason that God brought about the flood. So I tend to think that more than likely the reason that the sons of God later on in chapter 6 came upon the daughters of man is they learned everything they knew from what had already happened with Satan and Eve. So therefore, if their children became mutated and were giants, there's no reason to doubt that there could have been the same situation with Cain being some type of giant or Nephilim or whatever that was similar to what happened in chapter 6. And that being the reason, he would have been a lot bigger than Abel and then able to overtake him and kill him quite easily. I think that if that particular lineage was not totally destroyed in the flood, and in my research, I think that really Ham was the weakest link between the three sons of Noah that came through the flood, and that we know that Ham's son, especially Nimrod, in depiction from Babylonian reliefs and things that have been designed on sides of buildings and whatever, tablets, these great clay tablatures, he was actually depicted as being half man and half fish, or I'll say half serpent, because I think that's really, the scales are more of a serpentine scale than even a fish. But the fact that he is shown as being both tells me that there was a mixed lineage, and that lineage had to have come out from Cain and then through Ham into the present day. Because if that had not crossed over, then we would not have any what I call genetic problems in humanity today. And we see, especially in China, they have a lot of what they call giants. I mean, these are big human beings. And so I think that that's a weakened down form of genetic material that probably was interbred after the days of Noah and coming through the flood through Ham. We also know that the Bible speaks that Moses encountered the giants, and of course King David killed Goliath. So we know that the statue was much bigger as a human being. They were humans. They looked human. So it makes you understand that these beings prior to the flood had to have a human characteristic about them. And I would tend to agree that lineage came from Cain.
Well, Dr. Joye, we have arrived again to the end of the show. We've got 2 minutes remaining. I'd like to thank you and honor you for being always willing to, just as the caller had said earlier, to be accessible to those that want to inquire of your teachings and of your books, and for being humanly accessible. And I give thanks for the work that I've been able to do with you, and I just ask the Lord to bless you and Mel, to bless the listening audience, and to bless the people in Haiti that are suffering so much from the strains of the earthquake and from not finding food and water. I ask the Lord to bless all of those people and help them to endure and to survive as best they can. And I ask the Lord to bless all of you, the listening audience out there, yourselves and your family members, with discernment. And I ask you again to not believe anything that we tell you, to not base your truth on our research, but to go out and do your own research and verify these things for yourself. Or if you learn that what we're saying is not true, then please, we don't mind questions, and we don't mind dialogue in any way. You can go to the website, our website, www.fallenangels.tv, and I happen to be the webmaster there. And again, my name is Ben Garcia, and we welcome any inquiry you may have. And Dr. Joye, I hope that soon, possibly in the spring, that you and I can get together and continue on with the video work that we so are willing and would like to do. And
listen, I'm looking forward to that. And again, we'll try to do another radio show too, because we can't get through all the information that we'd like to share. So we'll be doing some of those.
Absolutely. And with that, we've arrived to the end of the show. So God bless everyone out there, and may the Lord give you and take care of you in every way you can. Dr. Joye, we'll talk to you soon.
Good night.
Bye-bye.